There are no feats in this story, no heroism, not even any real drama. There are no great battles, no miraculous healings, no wise decisions that change the course of history. There is only one person, slowly and painfully dying in his bed, surrounded by meaningless rituals of care, ineffective medicines, and the indifference of fate. This is not a story about life, but about a drawn out, banal, dirty, and shameful death that came for everyone, even kings. But before you get comfortable, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments which city you are watching from and what time it is where you are. I'm genuinely curious to see who's joined us. Now, make yourself comfortable. We're beginning. You enter the world on a cold day in the year 1154 in a castle that smells perpetually of damp stone and burning tallow. The birth is long, slow, and, by the standards of the 12th century, only moderately dangerous. Your mother, exhausted and pale, is already mentally drafting prayers for your survival. She knows the odds. The midwives, more superstitious than skilled, whisper about omens: an owl heard in the rafters, a dog barking at midnight. Nobody mentions the simple fact that almost every noble baby has at least a 50% chance of not making it to adulthood. That would spoil the mood. Your father, Sancho the Wise, has already survived enough childhood illnesses to make him seem both lucky and, paradoxically, unlucky. After all, survival in this century means watching everyone else die. As for you, you are merely another noisy addition to the echoing halls of the royal palace of Pamplona, destined, like all infants, for one eventual end: death. That you will die of disease rather than war or assassination seems at this point both unlikely and unremarkable. It is, after all, a world filled with fevers, coughs, and wounds that fester beneath dirty bandages. The castle itself is more fortress than home. Its walls are thick and damp, every corridor crowded with tapestries, trying and failing to keep the drafts out. Servants shuffle around in perpetual fear of doing something wrong and being dismissed, an event that, in these times, can be a slow, bureaucratic death sentence. Already, you are a problem to be solved, a baby to be kept alive, a future king to be protected from the thousand invisible threats of medieval existence. The midwives bring you goat's milk and cold water, convinced that the right mixture will make you strong. The priests say prayers in Latin that you will never understand, their words drifting upward with the candle smoke. Your first few days are uneventful, at least from your perspective. The grown-ups, of course, are convinced that every cough or shiver is a sign of something dreadful to come. Sometimes they are right, but for now, you survive, your tiny heart beating on in defiance of the black mold growing on the nursery walls. In this world, survival is a combination of luck, stubbornness, and perhaps a certain dull endurance. If you make it through the first month, there is cautious hope. If you reach your first year, your mother will begin to breathe again. Outside your room, the world lurches forward in its familiar, brutal routine. Fields are sown and harvested, soldiers train in muddy yards, and distant reports of war drift in from the borders. None of this concerns you. You are busy learning to cry, to be hungry, to sleep. Every hour is a negotiation with fate. Will the air in this drafty room thicken with deadly chill, or will the sun warm your little body through the high arched windows? You do not know it yet, but you are the future king. You are Sanchez, seventh of your name, the hope of Navarre, the last gasp of a family that knows all too well how fragile power can be. Already plans are being made around you. Who will nurse you? Who will educate you? Who will guard you while you sleep? The women in your mother's retinue argue quietly about the best remedies for colic and the most effective charms against the evil eye. You, meanwhile, are blissfully ignorant, as only a newborn can be. As the months pass, you grow in that haphazard way common to medieval babies. Some days you are strong and pink cheeked, other days you are feverish and limp, your fate hanging in the balance. Your parents watch you with a mixture of hope and fatalism. They have seen too much loss to be truly optimistic. Still, when you reach your first birthday, there is a rare celebration, complete with stale cakes and songs in bad Latin. You have survived something that so many do not. The first chapter of your life closes with a strange, quiet triumph, one that is less about living and more about not dying. You will not remember any of this, of course, but as you grow older, as you become a king, you will come to understand that your entire existence is defined by what you have survived and by what will eventually kill you. You learn to live with the smell of sickness before you learn to read or write. The castle, your childhood home, is a place of echoes, echoes of footsteps, of whispered prayers, of coughing that starts in the night and does not always end by morning. As a small child, you are carried through endless corridors by anxious nursemaids who firmly believe that every sudden chill or sour odor is the harbinger of death. In this place, every shadow on the wall is a potential omen. You quickly become familiar with the parade of diseases that visit your world. In your first years, you meet fever, diarrhea, chills, and pox. So many different types of pox that you lose count, but the adults always seem to have a new name and an old fear for each one. Sometimes it is smallpox, which scars the faces of the unlucky and claims the lives of the unlucky's siblings. Sometimes it is measles, which brings a rash so bright it seems almost festive, except for the crying. Other times it is the coughing sickness, the kind that rattles the rib cage and brings the physician running with foul-smelling syrups made from roots, moss, and sometimes things better left unnamed. It is considered normal for children to be sick most of the time. Sometimes you find it almost comforting. You know that just outside your window, children in the villages are dying in droves, one day from bloody flux, another day from some illness carried in by rats or strangers. No one expects you to survive unscathed. Instead, the people around you prepare for the worst at every turn, stashing relics of dubious saints under your pillow, muttering prayers to ward off the invisible. Your father, who will one day be called the wise, tries to teach you about the world in between bouts of his own coughing. He assures you that the kingdom is strong, that Navarre has survived plagues before and will survive them again. You listen, but you also hear the uncertainty in his voice. You watch as new tutors and servants arrive, only to disappear a month later, replaced by others whose hands do not yet tremble from fever. Your earliest lessons are about impermanence. The castle's doctor, a man who smells permanently of garlic and despair, visits your bedside almost daily. He prods and pokes, prescribes everything from honeyed wine to dried frog powder. On especially bad days, he prescribes bleeding, a practice you come to dread, not least because it is always accompanied by much groaning and no improvement. In his more optimistic moments, he promises you that science is advancing. In his gloomier moods, he tells your father to pray harder. You become intimately acquainted with the vocabulary of suffering. Your days are measured in headaches, chills, sweats, and the odd stretches of feeling almost well. You learn to recognize the sound of death coming for someone else, the hush that falls when a servant collapses, the solemn procession of monks chanting as they carry a body out through the kitchens at dawn. No one tries to shield you from the realities of mortality. In fact, you suspect that most people believe a child will grow up stronger if he knows the odds from the beginning. Every now and then, the castle is struck by an epidemic. Sometimes it is typhoid, sometimes dysentery, sometimes something so new that the monks have to invent a name for it. Rooms are hastily abandoned, tapestries burned, and prayers redoubled. You are moved to another wing, another bed, as if running from the disease might keep it at bay. You learn, with the solemnity of someone twice your age, that hope is more fragile than bone. You watch other children die, some your playmates, some the children of servants, whose names you never remember. Their absences are marked by a strange silence that settles over the castle, heavy and suffocating. The adults speak of them only in whispers, as if speaking too loudly will call the sickness back. Sometimes you feel guilty for surviving. Other times you feel angry. Mostly you just feel tired. When you are well enough, you venture into the castle gardens. There you encounter new threats: mosquitoes, ticks, and the mysterious bad air that everyone blames for sudden fevers. The adults warn you not to play too near the stagnant ponds. Naturally, this is where you end up most often. In your childish ignorance, you think that if you can face the place where sickness is born, you might understand it, or at least stop being afraid. But the fear never really goes away. Your education is constantly interrupted by illness. You are always falling behind in Latin, always behind in swordplay, always catching up on the latest political intrigues. Your tutors are patient, but your mother is not. She reminds you that a king must be strong, that he must rise above his body's weakness. You try to believe her, but your body has other plans. You start to notice patterns, fevers that return with the changing seasons, coughs that linger through the winter, aches that never quite disappear. You notice, too, the futility of much of the medical advice you receive. The doctor's potions taste terrible and rarely work. The prayers do little to comfort you. The relics seem to be no more effective than any other object. You develop a quiet cynicism, which in this world is perhaps the most practical form of wisdom. As you grow older, you become less frightened of the prospect of dying and more curious about the mechanics of survival. What is it that makes one person live while another dies? Why does one child recover from a fever while another slips away in the night? No one can answer these questions, least of all the priests. Their answers are always the same: God's will, fate, the inscrutable plans of the heavens. Through it all, you survive. You survive because you are lucky, or strong, or stubborn, or perhaps because your body is simply not yet finished with you. You survive while others do not, and this simple fact will shape everything you are to become. The world will remember you as a king, but you will remember yourself as a boy who grew up in the shadow of endless epidemics, learning slowly, painfully, and inevitably that living is mostly a matter of not dying, at least not yet. You learn quickly that the castle is not merely a fortress, it is a laboratory of discomforts, most of them invisible, all of them blamed on the weather. Of all the threats that haunt your childhood, none are more omnipresent or more misunderstood than the infamous medieval draft. You are taught from the earliest age that moving air is not just uncomfortable, but potentially deadly, a harbinger of fevers and chills, and, in some inexplicable way, divine punishment. Your nursemaids are the guardians of this ancient superstition. If there is the faintest suspicion of a draft, a cool breeze sneaking beneath a heavy oaken door, the subtle shifting of a tapestry, when someone walks too close to the wall, the castle erupts into a minor panic. Windows are slammed shut, cracks are stuffed with rags, and you are bundled in layer upon layer of wool, regardless of the season. If you so much as sneeze, half the staff will insist it was caused by bad air, and you will find yourself confined to your chambers for days, with only the company of grumbling monks and a never ending supply of tepid broth. There is a kind of irony in all this, though you will not recognize it until much later. Everyone is so consumed with preventing drafts, so obsessed with trapping every molecule of stale air within the castle walls, that no one realizes they are creating the perfect breeding ground for the very diseases they fear most. The heavy curtains, the closed shutters, the perpetual gloom, these do not protect you, they suffocate you. And yet, to question the wisdom of your elders would be the height of foolishness. You learn instead to nod solemnly when the subject of drafts comes up, which is often. Your father lectures you on the dangers of night air, a mysterious and ever present threat said to lurk in the corridors after sunset. According to him, no amount of prayer or good behavior can shield a person from its effects. The night air is blamed for every unexplained ache, every sudden death, every lingering cough. It comes for everyone eventually, your father says, as if discussing taxes or time. A wise king avoids it. You try to take this lesson to heart, but you cannot help noticing that he is often sick himself. As you grow, you learn that avoiding drafts is less about survival and more about routine, a way for people to feel in control of a world that never truly is. When the physician comes, he rarely finds a breeze to blame for your latest illness, but he always prescribes the same remedies: more layers, more fires, fewer open windows. Once, you ask him if anyone has ever been cured by these measures. He looks at you as though you have suggested making a pact with the devil. Your tutors, educated in the finest traditions of the time, reinforce these ideas with complicated lectures about humors, vapors, and celestial influences. They speak with absolute certainty about things no one understands. The balance of hot and cold, wet and dry, is, in their view, more important than any actual treatment. If you fall ill during the summer, it is because you have exposed yourself to cold air. If you sweat during the winter, it is because the air inside the castle is too hot. There is always a reason, but never a solution. It is difficult not to laugh at the absurdity of it all, but you quickly learn that laughter is itself suspicious, an early sign of madness or perhaps a prelude to consumption. Instead, you develop the talent of silent amusement, watching as adults rearrange the world in pursuit of safety that never arrives. Sometimes you catch a glimpse of the outdoors, a bright, breezy day, birds swirling in the fresh air, and you feel a strange longing. But the outdoors is a place of risk, and risk is for peasants, not kings. Your mother is particularly zealous in her campaign against drafts. She insists on inspecting your chambers herself, trailing behind a retinue of servants armed with heavy blankets and complaints. She scolds anyone who leaves a door ajar or allows a fire to go out. Once, she nearly faints when she finds you sitting too close to a window. "Do you want to die young?" she hisses, as if this is a choice you are making on purpose. You apologize, though you are not sure what for. Life becomes a careful dance, opening a window just enough for light, but not so much for air, sleeping beneath a mountain of blankets in the heat of summer. Never, under any circumstances, allowing yourself to feel a breeze. These rules shape your days as much as any law or lesson. The air outside becomes a distant dream, something to be glimpsed but never touched. In the rare moments when you are allowed outside, the world feels sharp and thrilling. You imagine that every gust of wind is a test, a challenge to your carefully constructed fear. Sometimes you deliberately stand in the path of a draft, daring fate to notice you. Nothing happens, at least not right away, but the anxiety remains, a silent companion that follows you back indoors. As you approach adolescence, you begin to suspect that the draft is not your true enemy. There are far worse things lurking in the dark corners of the castle, real dangers that no amount of fabric or fire can keep at bay. But the rituals continue. The battle against drafts becomes a metaphor for every other hopeless struggle in your life, an endless, exhausting effort to hold back the inevitable. You understand, finally, that the draft is simply another name for the fear of what you cannot control. It is easier to stuff a crack with rags than to accept that illness is random, that death is arbitrary, that sometimes the air itself is not your enemy, but your only friend. And yet, you keep the windows closed. You are 10 years old when the cold finally claims its first real victory. Not the little sniffles and shivers that come and go like a bad smell in the corridors, but the sort of illness that announces itself with a fanfare, aches so deep you wonder if your bones are melting, a cough so fierce it rattles the candle stubs on your bedside table, and a fever that turns your dreams into delirium. It was, for all intents and purposes, a very common cold by the standards of the time, but in the careful architecture of your life, it feels like the siege of a city. It begins, as these things always do, with a single innocent sneeze. The sound echoes off the stone walls and brings your nursemaids running, expressions shifting from resignation to panic with practiced efficiency. You are hurried into bed, swaddled in so many layers you can barely breathe, and the window shutters are slammed shut as if the draft itself is to blame for your misery. The castle doctor arrives, carrying his collection of foul smelling potions and looking more anxious than usual. He pokes and prods, mutters darkly about humors and the moon, and prescribes a combination of garlic poultices, honeyed wine, and, of course, bloodletting. The bloodletting is performed in your chamber, the doctor's hands shaking as he applies the leech to your arm. You watch, morbidly fascinated, as your blood pools in a bowl, the color duller than you expect. The pain is not much, but the humiliation stings. You are, after all, a prince, destined for greatness, and yet here you are, at the mercy of a creature smaller than your fingernail, and a man who believes that draining your life away will somehow save it. The fever rises, and with it comes the parade of remedies. Your attendants line up, each with their own contribution to the cause: mustard plasters, bowls of boiled onion water, prayers whispered in Latin so badly mangled you wonder if even the saints can understand them. Your mother sits by your bedside, her face etched with worry and a kind of exhausted resignation. She holds your hand through the night, murmuring reassurances that neither of you believe. After the first night, she sends for the priests. After the second, she starts promising offerings to every local saint, from the well-known to the obscure. Sleep is elusive, not because of the fever, though that would be enough, but because the castle does not sleep. The footsteps of servants shuffle endlessly outside your door. Someone is always tending a fire, fetching more linens, or seeking the elusive doctor. In your fever dreams, the castle walls close in and then dissolve, replaced by scenes of battles you have never fought and landscapes you have never seen. You sweat through 3 changes of sheets in a single night, and still the cold clings to you, relentless. On the third day, the doctor tries a new strategy. He applies a poultice of crushed garlic, rosemary, and a mysterious black powder he refuses to identify. The effect is immediate and overwhelming. You feel as though your chest is both burning and frozen, and for a brief moment, you believe you are dying. The adults assure you that this is a good sign, proof that the illness is being driven out. You are not so sure. The only thing being driven anywhere is your will to live. As the days drag on, the routine becomes familiar. Waking in a haze, coughing until your ribs ache, being forced to swallow something that tastes like wet earth, and then drifting back into a fevered half sleep. The world shrinks to the space of your bed, the flicker of candlelight on the walls, and the distant tolling of the chapel bell. You learn to measure time by the arrival of new remedies and the departure of used linens. Occasionally, a shadow at your door signals the arrival of your father, who stands silently at the threshold, offering no words of comfort, only a worried frown and a muttered prayer. Your siblings, if you have any, are kept away from you. They are told you are contagious, though what that means is still the subject of much debate among your caretakers. Some believe that illness travels in smells, others that it is carried on the breath of the dying, still others that it is simply the punishment for some forgotten sin. Whatever the cause, you are alone, the center of a storm no one understands. On the seventh day, the fever breaks as suddenly as it arrived. You wake to find yourself drenched in sweat, your sheets clammy and foul, but the pain in your bones is less, the cough softer. The doctor is quick to claim credit, insisting that his treatments, and not the simple passage of time, are responsible for your recovery. Your mother weeps with relief. The priests offer extra prayers of thanksgiving, and the servants murmur about miracles. You, meanwhile, are simply tired. The aftermath is anticlimactic. Your appetite returns slowly, and with it a new suspicion of anything that smells even remotely medicinal. The castle resumes its rhythm, the anxiety that filled every corridor replaced by a cautious optimism. Your father insists that you are stronger for having survived, though you suspect that surviving has little to do with strength and everything to do with luck. No one seems eager to question this. Life resumes, but it is never quite the same. You catch yourself flinching at the sound of a sneeze, your skin prickling when the air turns cold. You are sent to your lessons with new urgency. Your tutors remind you that a king cannot afford to be fragile, though they make allowances for your lingering weakness. You are, after all, the heir, and heirs are not allowed to be permanently ill, at least not in public. Still, the experience leaves a mark. You are more cautious, more cynical, more aware of the thin line that separates health from sickness, life from death. You realize that your survival was never guaranteed, that the rituals and remedies of your childhood are as much about reassuring the adults as they are about helping you. The next time someone falls ill in the castle, you watch the proceedings with a weary detachment. You know the script by heart, and you know that the ending is always uncertain. What you do not know, at least not yet, is that this cold is only the first of many trials. The world will demand more from you than mere survival. But for now, you settle back into your daily routine, grateful for the simple act of breathing without pain and, perhaps, a little more afraid of the drafts than before. Adulthood, when it finally arrives, is less of a triumphant transformation and more of a slow, reluctant crawl over the finish line. You wake up one morning somewhere between the ages of 14 and 17. No one is ever quite sure of your real birthday, since records are lost as easily as servants, and realize that, though you are now considered an adult, your has not caught up with the concept. The cough that started last winter is still with you. The ache in your joints returns with the rain, and the mysterious headaches arrive with each full moon, as predictable as the tides. Everyone around you pretends not to notice. To them, your perpetual state of half illness is simply one more royal quirk, a peculiar habit to be endured alongside your dislike of fish and your fondness for sleeping past sunrise. Your tutors adjust your schedule with a sigh, moving lessons to the afternoons so you have a fighting chance of being awake for them. The fencing master, a leathery old man with a voice like gravel, insists that your lungs would clear up if you spent more time outdoors. The physician prescribes more of everything: more garlic, more leeches, more hot baths, more cold compresses, more hope. You learn to fake your way through health. At official dinners, you smile through your headaches, swallow watery soup that tastes of boiled bone and regret, and nod along to conversations about alliances and taxes. You shake hands with ambassadors and try not to wince when their grip finds a bruise or a sore spot. At times, you are convinced that your courtiers have formed a betting pool on which of your symptoms will kill you first. The cough, the fever, the trembling hands, or the ever present fatigue. The irony, of course, is that your position as heir and soon king means you are surrounded by every possible comfort and every conceivable threat. The pillows are soft, but the shadows are long. The food is rich, but occasionally laced with just enough uncertainty to make you suspicious of every bite. The castle is warmer than most homes in Navarre, but it is also a magnet for every cold, infection, and rumor in the kingdom. Illness in your world is not democratic. It visits the highborn and lowborn alike, but when it comes for you, it does so with extra pageantry. You begin to notice that illness is a kind of currency. At court, a well timed fainting spell can delay a difficult meeting, while a conveniently dramatic cough might earn you a day's reprieve from the endless council debates. There is an art to appearing just sick enough to be pitied, but not so ill as to lose respect. Too robust, and your rivals might see you as a threat. Too frail, and they might start measuring you for a coffin. You learn to tread a careful line, one foot in the sickbed, one on the throne. Your mother, by now an expert in the rituals of royal illness, hovers at the edges of your life with tinctures and tonics. She insists on supervising your every meal, your every nap, your every prayer. She sends for healers and priests in equal measure, desperate to find something, anything, that will keep you upright long enough to secure the succession. You, for your part, submit to these attentions with a mix of boredom and resignation. Every so often, you fantasize about running away, joining a monastery, and becoming anonymous. But you know the monks would only prescribe more of the same, more garlic, more prayers, more silence. You develop a sort of gallows humor about your health. When courtiers ask after your well being, you offer elaborate answers involving the color of your sputum and the latest in leech technology. You speculate for your own amusement which ancient saint is responsible for your most recent flare up, and you secretly give names to your symptoms. The cough is called Ignacio, the headache Isidro, the fever Beatrice. They are in their way your most loyal companions. Yet, for all your cynicism, you are not immune to hope. Every new remedy, every strange herb imported from distant lands, carries a whisper of possibility. Perhaps this time, the bitter tea or the strange smelling poultice will be the cure. Perhaps this physician, with his fancy robes and foreign accent, knows something the others do not. But hope fades quickly, replaced by the familiar rhythms of malaise. As the years crawl forward, you become increasingly aware of the gap between what your body can do and what is expected of you. You are expected to ride at the head of armies, to dance at court, to sit through hours of ceremonies and negotiations. You do these things, sometimes well, sometimes poorly, always with the specter of illness at your shoulder. There are days when you feel almost normal, almost strong, and you cling to those moments like a drowning man to driftwood, but the sickness always returns. It is there in the morning when you wake with the taste of iron in your mouth and a heaviness in your limbs. It is there at night when the candles gutter and the world shrinks to the size of your bedchamber. It is there in the sideways glances of your advisers, in the tight smiles of your mother, in the endless, useless prayers of the palace priests. You come to understand, slowly and with a kind of grim acceptance, that being king does not protect you from the realities of the human body. Power cannot heal a cough, nor can money buy immunity from the endless parade of medieval ailments. The only thing your station has truly given you is a larger audience for your suffering and a more elaborate set of rituals to mark your inevitable decline. Still, you persist. You go to your meetings, sign your documents, listen to reports of crop failures and minor rebellions. You make decisions that you barely remember, nodding along to the council of men whose health is, for now, better than your own. You wonder sometimes if they are counting the days until you are too sick to rule, if they have already chosen which nephew or cousin will replace you when the time comes. In public, you maintain the illusion of vigor. In private, you keep a careful ledger of your aches and pains, noting each new symptom like a miser counting coins. You know, better than anyone, that adulthood is not a destination, but a condition, a state of being in which sickness is simply part of the scenery. And so you continue, an adult in name, a patient in practice. You do not stop being sick. You simply get better at pretending otherwise. If there is one lesson adulthood insists upon teaching, it is that every friendship, no matter how cherished, is provisional. In your youth, you are surrounded by a rotating cast of companions, young nobles from neighboring fiefdoms sent to foster alliances, sons of loyal retainers who are meant to be your playmates and, eventually, your confidants. Some of these boys grow into men at your side, sharing in your studies, your hunts, your whispered midnight complaints about the food and the weather. Most, however, do not. The first to go is Martine, whose laugh echoes through the stables long after he is gone. His end comes swiftly, a fever that appears on a Tuesday and is finished by Friday. You remember standing at his bedside, watching him sweat and shiver, his eyes glassy and wild. The doctor, running out of ideas, tries everything: more leeches, more hot stones, more prayers muttered into the folds of his blanket. Nothing helps. You hold Martin's hand until it is cold, and then you are ushered out by nervous adults who do not want the future king catching something so inconvenient. After Martine, there is Diego, felled by an infected cut after a hunting accident. It is a small wound, a scratch, really, nothing worth remembering. But the castle air is not clean, and neither are the rags that bind his arm. Within a week, his whole body is burning, his skin marked by red streaks that everyone agrees look like flames. Diego's mother blames herself, the servants blame bad luck, the priest blames original sin, and the doctor blames bad humors. You blame the world for allowing something so trivial to become so fatal. Others follow. Some fade away so quietly that you do not notice their absence until long after they are gone, their names erased by the steady progress of your own survival. A few die spectacularly, falling from horses, struck down in jousts, or, in one memorable case, run through by an overeager older brother practicing with a sword that was supposed to be blunted. For each, there are the same rituals: a hurried funeral, a collection of mumbled platitudes about God's will, and an unspoken relief that it was not you. It is not just your friends who vanish. Tutors disappear without warning, replaced by new faces who insist they have always been part of your education. Servants are suddenly absent from their usual posts, their places taken by silent replacements who pretend not to notice the shadows left behind. Sometimes you hear that they have died of fever, of bad blood, of a cough that lingered too long. Other times, no explanation is offered. The castle simply absorbs the loss and moves forward, as it always does. You notice that your parents rarely speak of the dead. To do so is to risk inviting misfortune, to remind the world that you are still vulnerable. When you mention Martine or Diego, your mother shushes you with a gentle but urgent hand, her eyes darting to the door as if death might be listening. Your father, always practical, advises you to remember the lessons your friends taught you, but not to dwell on their fates. Life is a brief gift, my son, he says, and grief is a luxury for those with nothing else to do. You try to believe him, but grief is stubborn and does not respond well to reason. Some nights you dream of those who are gone. You see their faces in the firelight, hear their laughter in the corridors, feel their absence like a missing tooth. In the mornings, you wake with a heaviness that clings to you for hours, a dull ache that not even your persistent cough can distract you from. You become skilled at hiding these feelings, learning to present a stoic face to your advisors and a cheerful one to your remaining friends. It is, after all, unseemly for a prince to wallow. Still, the deaths leave their mark. You grow cautious, suspicious of every cough and every cut, every fever that lingers beyond its welcome. You begin to see illness not as an enemy to be conquered, but as a patient assassin waiting for the right moment to strike. Your faith in the doctors fades with each new funeral. Their rituals feel empty, their remedies little more than elaborate ways to pass the time. The only thing they can truly offer is the comfort of routine. At times, you wonder if it is better not to make friends at all. Each new bond carries with it the certainty of loss. Yet you cannot help yourself. There is a sweetness in shared laughter, in secret games, and quiet confidences whispered beneath the weight of responsibility. For a little while, friendship makes you forget how fragile everything is. When you attend the funerals, you find yourself rehearsing the same expressions of solemnity, mouthing the same prayers. You watch the grown-ups exchange glances, some grieving honestly, others calculating what the loss means for their own ambitions. The castle's priest always preaches about the afterlife, promising a peace that feels increasingly abstract. You sit through these sermons with hands folded, eyes downcast, wishing for a world where the dead could simply stay dead and stop haunting your thoughts. It does not help that every death is a lesson in politics. With each lost companion, the balance of power among the young nobles shifts. Favors are called in, alliances are redrawn, families jostle for a chance to replace what was lost. You see it all, even if you pretend not to care. You realize that your own survival is not just a matter of luck or divine favor, it is a form of currency, and everyone around you is invested in its value. You try, as best you can, to keep living. You ride out with your friends, hunt in the forests, laugh at bad jokes, and pretend that the world is not always on the verge of disaster. But underneath it all, you carry the knowledge that each day is borrowed, that every smile could be the last. You wonder sometimes how many more funerals you will attend before someone else is rehearsing their solemn expression for you. And so you grow up surrounded by the ghosts of your friends, learning to live with absence, to bear the weight of survival. In time, the memories blur, the names fade, but the lesson remains. To live in the Middle Ages is to keep score, not of victories or triumphs, but of the ones who are no longer here to remember you. The day you become king, the kingdom does not pause out of respect for your new status. The sun rises reluctantly, the peasants trudge through the fields, and you wake up with the same stubborn cough that has haunted you for years. There is a great ceremony, of course, robes and rings, and the heavy weight of a crown pressed onto your brow with such seriousness you almost laugh. The chapel is cold, the incense is choking, and through it all, you stifle the urge to clear your throat, aware that the eyes of every bishop, noble and rival, are fixed on you. As you sit upon the throne for the first time, you notice the seat is less comfortable than you imagined. Your mind drifts, not to matters of state, but to the sharp tickle in your chest and the dull ache in your joints. Your physician hovers at the edge of the hall, eyes darting between you and the assembled court, no doubt wondering how much laudanum is appropriate for a coronation. The answer, you decide, is always more than you are given. Rule, you quickly learn, is mostly about enduring discomfort while pretending not to notice it. Your days are filled with audiences and councils, each lasting precisely as long as your back can tolerate the wooden chairs. Courtiers arrive with complaints and requests: more grain for the towns, fewer taxes for the nobles, new privileges for the church. You listen, nod, try not to let your mind wander to the slow, constant pressure behind your eyes, or the way your breath sometimes whistles on the way out. It becomes a joke among your closest companions, never spoken aloud, but clear in every shared glance, that the kingdom's fortunes rise and fall with your lungs. On good days, your voice is steady and your decisions brisk. On bad days, you wave your hand in dismissal, leaving the business of government to your advisors while you retreat to your chamber, wrapped in blankets and self-pity. The doctors, emboldened by your royal status, throw themselves into their work with renewed vigor. They present you with a parade of remedies, each more dubious than the last. Infusions of willow bark, poultices made from moss and mold scraped from the castle's northern wall, tinctures of wine and vinegar, and the odd animal organ. You submit to these treatments with the patience of a man who has no other options. Sometimes you think the real cure is the boredom that comes with endless repetition. There are moments when you wonder if your body is conspiring against you. You read reports from the provinces, crop failures, outbreaks of fever, border skirmishes, and feel your head begin to throb in sympathy. Your advisors suggest rest, but rest is impossible when every knock at the door might bring news of disaster. You learn to endure, to smile through your pain, to rule in spite of your frailties. You become an expert in hiding exhaustion, cultivating the art of the dignified yawn. Your court, meanwhile, responds to your condition in its own way. The sycophants offer elaborate toasts to your health. The priests lead processions through the chapel, and your rivals spread rumors that you are on death's door. You begin to notice which nobles gather closer on your worst days, their eyes shining with poorly concealed anticipation. Succession is the unspoken subject of every conversation, the dark current beneath the surface of courtly chatter. Despite it all, you try to be a good king. You sit through endless meetings, sign decrees with a hand that trembles more than you would like, and offer judgments with as much gravitas as you can muster. You keep a careful eye on your household, knowing that in a world of illness, every servant is a potential vector, every guest a possible harbinger of doom. You order fires kept burning through the night, tapestries hung in the draftiest halls, herbs burned to drive out bad air. You might not believe in these rituals, but everyone around you does, and sometimes that is enough. You begin to recognize a hierarchy of illness at court. A runny nose is shrugged off, a fever treated with mild concern, but your cough, persistent, unpredictable, and now the subject of diplomatic correspondence, has become a matter of state. Ambassadors send word home about the king's health, foreign rulers probe for weakness, and the chroniclers sharpen their quills, hoping to record something worthy of a footnote. You are both more important and more vulnerable than ever. Your mother, now grayer and quieter, visits you with regular gifts: a new rosary, a lock of some saint's hair, the dried heart of a long dead martyr said to cure coughs. You accept these tokens with gratitude, knowing she means well, though in truth you would trade them all for a night of uninterrupted sleep. She reminds you to pray, to eat, to trust in God's plan. You nod and smile, but in your heart, you suspect that God is as baffled by medieval medicine as you are. The days blur together, each one a repetition of the last: meetings, meals, medicines, and moments of uneasy rest. Occasionally, there is excitement, a diplomatic crisis, an unexpected visitor, a rare day when you feel almost healthy. These are fleeting, quickly swallowed by the monotony of duty and the ever present ache in your bones. You develop rituals of your own. You walk the battlements at dawn, hoping the chill will clear your lungs. You spend hours in the library, poring over treatises on health and longevity, though most are little more than catalogues of superstitions and contradictions. Sometimes you fantasize about escaping it all, fleeing to the countryside, living as a hermit, breathing fresh air without the pressure of a kingdom on your shoulders. But you always return to your bed, your crown, and your cough. And so you reign. You cough. You survive, if only just. You become the king that the kingdom needs, and the patient that your doctors cannot cure. The chronicles will remember your decrees, your battles, your alliances. You will remember the taste of herbal wine at midnight, the scratch of woolen blankets against feverish skin, the sound of your own lungs echoing through the empty corridors of the palace. In the end, you rule not by strength, but by endurance, and in this, at least, you are a master. You are well into your reign when the whispers begin, soft at first, but growing with each passing week. They say the plague has returned. The words drift through the market, seep through the castle walls, and settle like dust on every surface. At first, you dismiss the rumors as another round of peasant hysteria or the fevered invention of anxious monks. The world, after all, is always ending somewhere, but then come the bodies. It begins on the outskirts, a farmer's wife, found with dark blotches blooming on her skin, dead before sundown. The priests call it a curse, the healers mutter about bad air, and the villagers burn her house for good measure, as if fire can frighten disease away. The doctor at court grows agitated. He presses you for funds to buy more leeches and imports mysterious powders from distant apothecaries, as if any of these things might stand a chance against the invisible enemy now moving steadily toward your gates. You feel the fear long before you see the evidence. The castle's routines change overnight. Doors are barred, servants are dismissed, and the kitchen staff boils every cup and spoon until your meals taste faintly of ash. Everyone you know becomes a potential vector for disaster. Every cough, every sneeze, every pallid face is suddenly suspect. Your mother insists on wearing a sprig of rosemary at all times. Your advisors, usually so eager for your attention, now keep their distance, bowing extra low and speaking from the far side of the council table. When the plague finally arrives inside the walls, it does so quietly. A maid does not report for work. A stable boy is found collapsed in the straw. Within days, the sick room fills. The castle, once noisy and bustling, becomes hushed and anxious, every hallway echoing with the sound of prayers and the occasional muffled sob. You feel trapped, not by your crown, but by the air itself. Every corner holds a new anxiety. The royal physician takes charge, though his confidence is thin and cracking. He prescribes burning herbs in every room, sage, thyme, anything that smokes and stings the eyes. Your chambers become a fog of pungent aroma and futile hope. When this fails to halt the deaths, he doubles down on the usual favorites: bloodletting, cold compresses, and, always, a fresh round of prayers. You comply, because to do otherwise would be to admit there is nothing to be done. You notice who disappears first: the lowliest servants, the old, the already frail. Soon the toll climbs. The son of your steward, the niece of a knight, the woman who brings you water in the night. They are replaced sometimes, but more often not. The castle grows quieter with every passing day. Some try to flee. You hear tales of villagers abandoning their homes, whole hamlets left to rot in the fields, livestock wandering lost. But there is nowhere to run. The plague is not a storm you can outrun or a siege you can break. It is in the air, in the water, in the very fabric of daily life. Even the bravest begin to look haunted, walking the corridors with hollow eyes, clutching at relics and charms. Outside, the world withers. The fields are untended, the roads empty. Messengers arrive with grim news, whole towns abandoned, monasteries turned into tombs, priests conducting mass for empty pews. You do what a king must. You issue proclamations, command prayers, order the cleaning of wells, and the burning of refuse. None of it seems to make a difference. Your authority, so absolute on paper, is powerless against a foe that does not listen. Your own fear is more mundane, but no less real. You scrutinize your skin in the mornings, check your tongue in the mirror, monitor every ache and shiver. When you hear coughing in the night, your heart hammers. The physician assures you that kings are not immune, but at least you have access to the best care, such as it is. You do not find this comforting. The court, for all its luxury, is not immune to the paranoia. The nobles become obsessed with finding blame. Some suspect the Jews, some the lepers, some the traders who cross the borders for grain and news. You are forced to issue proclamations of protection, more for the sake of public order than out of any belief that the guilty can be found. The monks, meanwhile, organize processions, dragging relics through the streets in a desperate attempt to bribe heaven. You watch from your window, unsure whether to envy or pity their faith. Sometimes you try to pray. Sometimes you just drink. The nights are long, the castle walls claustrophobic, and the silence suffocating. You take to wandering the corridors in the hours before dawn, wrapped in your thickest robe, haunted by the memory of the faces you will not see again. Your mother's hair turns whiter by the week. Your advisor's whispers turn from the affairs of state to the affairs of succession. Eventually, the deaths begin to slow. The survivors, those who can still walk at least, emerge from their rooms with the tentative hope of those who have seen the worst and lived through it. Life resumes, but it is not the same. The empty spaces at table, the half-staffed kitchens, the shuttered chapel all speak of loss. You too survive, but the experience marks you inside and out. Your cough is worse now. Your hands shake more often. Your sleep is restless. When the peasants return to the fields and the markets open again, you find yourself less interested in their petitions and more interested in the simple fact that they are alive to make them. You do not know if the plague will return. You do not know if you will be lucky a second time. You do know that you are, for now, still king. But you are not unscathed. The world is smaller, quieter, and infinitely more fragile than it was before. And so you wait, listening for the next cough, the next rumor, the next invisible enemy already stirring on the horizon. It is only after the plague has retreated, leaving behind a kingdom half empty and a court half mad, that you find yourself prey to a new and equally hopeless pursuit, the search for immortality, or, failing that, at least an escape from the steady decline of your body. You are not the first king to discover an obsession with health. In fact, it seems that half of your ancestors spent their declining years in pursuit of miraculous cures, legendary elixirs, and the perfect potion that might let them linger on the throne 1 year, 1 month, 1 week longer. The castle's physician, now the senior survivor of a long line of less fortunate colleagues, becomes your reluctant companion in this quest. He brings you ever stranger remedies, each with its own folklore and, sometimes, a little Latin. There are snake tongues, dried and powdered and slipped into your wine with the promise of restoring manly vigor. There is wolf's bile, scraped from the innards of a beast, brought down on a royal hunt, carefully blended into honey, and forced down your throat at dawn. For a time, there is a craze for masticating dried toadstools, bitter, dangerous, and, in the opinion of at least one monk, a guaranteed path to sainthood or insanity. You try all of them. You try because it is expected, because your mother weeps with hope every time you choke down another cup of bitter brew, because the court watches and whispers and needs to believe you will not simply fade away like so many others. But mostly, you try because in the dim light before dawn, you are afraid. Afraid of the next fever, the next cough, the next sign that your body is, after all, not immune to the rot of time. Some of the remedies are merely disgusting: moss scraped from church walls, boiled with vinegar, crushed beetles, said to be warming to the liver, oil of rose petals, which, if nothing else, masks the stench of illness. Others are more creative. One physician brings you a jar of mummified mouse, soaked in the wine of Cyprus, and left beneath the altar for a month. He swears that kings of old swore by it. Another offers you the elixir of life from a wandering alchemist, an unctuous sludge that leaves your tongue numb for a week and gives you visions of the Virgin Mary making bread in your kitchen. You keep a careful ledger of these experiments, though you doubt future chroniclers will be interested in the details of your bowels or the varying aftertastes of preserved snake. Still, it is comforting to keep records. It allows you to believe, for a moment, that your fate is something you can track, manage, maybe even improve. The monks are eager to assist. They bring you relics, splinters of the true cross, vials of holy oil, the charred toe of a martyr whose name no one quite remembers. Each is accompanied by a story, always involving a miraculous recovery, never mentioning the eventual, inescapable death that followed. They organize processions, fasts, and elaborate chains of prayer. They fill your room with the aroma of incense, the drone of chanting, and the hope that, if enough words are said in the right order, you might be spared what took your father, your friends, your enemies. You learn quickly that hope is its own kind of sickness. Every time a new cure fails, you sink a little further into cynicism. But cynicism, like faith, can be comforting. It dulls the edge of disappointment, turns each new remedy into a private joke. You begin to name your potions as if they are members of the court: Sir Basilisk, Lady Nettle, Countess Rosemary. You imagine them bickering in your stomach, vying for a place at the royal table. Occasionally, a treatment does make you feel better, if only for a day, a morning, an hour. These moments are treasured and perhaps exaggerated. Your mother claims you look healthier. The physician crows about his success, and the servants whisper that maybe, just maybe, the king has found the cure that will keep him ruling until the end of days. Then the cough returns, the aches redouble, and you are left with nothing but a new layer of disappointment and a lingering taste of burnt sage. Your search for immortality extends beyond the physical. You invite wise men and mystics to court, men with foreign accents and mysterious scars, each bearing a different philosophy of the body and soul. One insists that bathing in ice cold rivers will shock the humors into balance. Another recommends hours of silence, broken only by reciting psalms while balancing on one leg. Yet another claims that eating nothing but boiled onions for a fortnight will rid you of melancholy and grant prophetic dreams. You try them all, accumulating a portfolio of odd habits and failed miracles. Your counselors, who must maintain their own appearances, begin to adopt your rituals. Soon, the entire court is drinking wormwood tea, avoiding evil herbs, and avoiding drafts more than ever. There is a fashion for rosemary necklaces, believed to repel both plague and creditors. If you had the energy, you would be amused. Instead, you note that hope, like illness, is contagious. There are days when the only thing these experiments cure is boredom. The routine of ruling, the endless reports, the squabbling nobles, the back to back councils fades a little when you are experimenting with another outlandish elixir or hearing a new story of miraculous recovery. It is not an immortality, but it is a distraction. You know, deep down, that no herb or relic will change your fate. Death, as ever, waits just beyond the next cough, the next chill, the next miscalculated dose of imported powder. But the search, at least, keeps you moving, keeps you hoping, keeps you from the one thing worse than illness. Surrender. You learn to savor the chase, the brief hope, the quiet, inevitable disappointment. You realize that the true art of being a medieval king is not in finding the cure, but in pretending, convincingly, relentlessly, that one is always just around the corner. And so you swallow your drafts, count your relics, and await the next miracle, never quite believing, never quite giving up. It is not immortality, but it will have to do. By the time you are 40, death is no longer a vague threat, but a fact as constant as the tolling of the chapel bell. It is not a question of whether you will die, but only when and by what inventive combination of maladies. You become accustomed to the rituals that mark the passage of your days, the careful inspection of your tongue each morning, the slow inventory of aches and tremors, the way your body reports its disrepair in signals as regular as sunrise. The castle itself becomes a theater of mortality. Once, its halls rang with laughter and argument, the sound of boots on flagstones, the squeals of hunting dogs chasing each other through the kitchens. Now, the sounds are quieter, more deliberate, the soft shuffle of servants changing linens, the low voices of physicians conferring in corners, the almost imperceptible click of rosary beads as your mother prays yet another novena for your soul. You are still alive, but it is hard not to feel that the world is already preparing for your departure. Every surface seems marked by the anticipation of your end. New tapestries arrive from distant cities, chosen for their solemn colors, as if already destined for a funeral. Your counselors press you to review your will, to clarify points of succession, to reconcile accounts so there will be no confusion when the inevitable occurs. You do these things with the air of a man preparing for a long journey, though the only journey you can imagine is the one that everyone must take, eventually, alone. You find yourself watching the older courtiers with a mixture of envy and disbelief. There is the chamberlain, whose beard is now mostly white, who claims to remember your grandfather's coronation. There is the matronly nurse who nursed you through your first fever and somehow survived a dozen more. These people are not immortal, but they are, for now, outpacing you. You realize, with a kind of wry detachment, that your own youth has slipped away while you were busy counting symptoms and swallowing remedies. The physicians remain optimistic, at least in your presence. They invent new concoctions, organize more elaborate bleeding sessions, and promise that the latest imported root or syrup will do what none before it have managed. You know their optimism is as thin as parchment, but you allow it, because hope, even false hope, is an easier guest than despair. Sometimes you wonder if the real talent of a royal doctor is not healing, but performance, a kind of grim courtly theater in which you play the patient king and they play the wise healer, both of you pretending that the ending might be different this time. At night, the castle grows colder. Fires are banked low to save wood for the winter, and the shadows in your chamber stretch out like fingers. You become aware of the noises you used to ignore, the distant crying of a baby in the servants' quarters, the quiet weeping of a widow who has lost her place, the soft scratching of a quill as the royal scribe drafts another letter, perhaps an announcement of your passing, to be sent at a moment's notice. It is easy in these hours to believe that the world is holding its breath, waiting for you to provide some sign of your willingness to surrender. The clergy, for their part, become more insistent. Your confessor visits daily, urging you to prepare your soul for the final accounting. He reminds you of your sins, most of which you remember only dimly, blurred by time and the haze of constant discomfort. You confess, you repent, you perform the penances. You wonder sometimes whether death is truly waiting for you, or whether it has simply lost interest and moved on to more deserving targets. The business of the kingdom does not pause. Papers continue to pile up on your desk. Reports arrive from the provinces. Ambassadors seek audiences to plead their causes. You handle these matters as best you can, aware that every decision might be your last. Your counselors watch you with the hungry attentiveness of men waiting for a feast to begin. They are careful to offer deference and sympathy, but you can see the calculation in their eyes. How much longer will the king endure? Who will be first to claim his place? You start to notice the ways in which the world prepares for your absence. The royal tailor presents new mourning garments for the household. The cook tests funeral recipes, bland and respectable, for the inevitable commemorative feast. The chroniclers request more time with you, eager to fill the blank spaces in their volumes with your words, your regrets, your last attempts at shaping a legacy. You indulge them, but the process is exhausting. You begin to suspect that history is as interested in the manner of your dying as in the fact of your living. Your body, meanwhile, continues its slow rebellion. There are days when you can scarcely rise from your bed, when the pain in your joints is matched only by the emptiness in your stomach. The physicians call this a turn of the humors and offer conflicting advice: more rest, more movement, more of this or that miraculous herb. You comply, but without conviction. You realize at last that you are not battling disease, you are negotiating with time. There is a peculiar freedom in this expectation of death. You are no longer required to be hopeful, only courteous. You can speak honestly, laugh at the absurdity of another new cure, refuse visitors whose voices grate on your nerves. The world shrinks to the things that truly matter: the feel of sunlight on your face, the sound of rain on the roof, the rare, unguarded moment of conversation with someone who remembers you as you were, not as you are. Some nights, when sleep is impossible and the castle is silent, you wonder what it would be like to simply stop, to cease fighting, cease hoping, and allow yourself to be carried forward by the current you have resisted for so long. But morning always comes, and with it, the same rituals, the same expectations, the same slow, measured passage toward whatever comes next. You live in expectation of death, but you continue to live. And that, you suppose, is its own small defiance. It begins as a whisper, barely a suggestion, a note out of tune in the familiar song of your ailments. For years, you have grown accustomed to aches and tremors, sudden chills, mysterious fevers that arrive uninvited and linger just long enough to ruin a week. But this new pain does not leave. It carves its way through your routines, reshapes the topography of your days, and makes itself at home as if it always belonged. At first, you dismiss it as the familiar ache of old wounds. Your knees have long been traitorous. Your back is a country that revolts with each change of the weather. When you mention the pain to your physician, he nods sagely and recommends warm compresses, followed by another experimental syrup whose taste you try not to recall. You nod in return and pretend that things are as they have always been. But within days, the ache deepens. It is no longer content to reside in your joints. It spreads like an invading army to your chest, your belly, the soft skin at your temples. Some mornings, you wake to find your hands trembling as if cold, though the fire is kept high and the windows are tightly shut. When you try to stand, your head swims. The room shifts and slides, the walls bending in the corners of your vision. You sit, breathless, as your advisors pretend not to notice. Soon, the simple acts of ruling become tests of endurance. Sitting through a council meeting is an exercise in persistence, your concentration fractured by waves of discomfort. The words of your ministers drift past you, their requests and complaints blurring into one another. You sign documents with a hand that wobbles, your signature shrinking and growing according to the whim of your pain. Sometimes you forget what you have just agreed to. Sometimes you do not care. Your mother visits with greater frequency. She brings a rosary and a look of quiet determination, as if she can ward off your decline through sheer maternal will. She presses your hand, smooths your brow, mutters prayers too softly for you to hear. You love her for her optimism, but you wish she would save it for someone with a future. The castle senses your weakness. Servants become cautious, their movements slower, their eyes lowered. The court physician, now looking even more harried than usual, doubles down on his rituals. You are subjected to endless treatments, leeches, blisters, yet more potions, the scent of which clings to your skin long after the cup has been drained. Monks arrive with relics. Priests offer masses for your soul, sometimes with a little too much enthusiasm. You begin to lose interest in the world outside your chamber. News arrives from the provinces. Another rebellion, a bountiful harvest, a disastrous flood. But you hear it as if underwater. The urgency of politics feels abstract, distant, almost unreal. Even the ceaseless machinations of your courtiers become background noise, like the wind outside your window or the creaking of old timbers at night. Your body makes new demands. Food, once a small pleasure, becomes a labor. The thought of another bowl of thin broth or a chunk of dry bread is enough to turn your stomach. You nibble to satisfy the expectations of those who watch you with worried eyes, but the taste is lost, the sensation of eating reduced to routine. Sometimes you dream of the flavors you once enjoyed: roasted meats, summer fruit, the heavy sweetness of spiced wine. These, too, are now out of reach. Sleep grows elusive. Nights pass in a blur of half consciousness, interrupted by pain, coughing, or the urgent need to relieve yourself. Yet another humiliation in a life increasingly defined by them. The physician prescribes poppy syrup, which dulls the edges, but cannot erase the dread that lingers in the darkness. You lie awake, counting the cracks in the ceiling, listening to the rain. Every sound is amplified: a servant's cough, a distant owl, the soft murmur of prayer outside your door. You realize at some point that you have started measuring time not in days or weeks, but in symptoms. When did the trembling begin? When did you last feel well enough to walk the length of the corridor? When did you last eat a meal without forcing it down? The answers elude you, lost in the monotony of decline. Your priests remind you that suffering is noble, that it brings you closer to God. You find the sentiment hollow, but you nod politely and accept their blessings. You wonder sometimes if the only thing worse than pain is the expectation that you should bear it with dignity. You suspect that if the saints endured half as much, it was not by choice. One morning, you wake to find you cannot rise. Your legs refuse to cooperate, as if they have finally tired of carrying you through the corridors of power. The physician is summoned. He examines you with elaborate seriousness, his diagnosis little more than a confirmation of what you already know. The end is coming. Not today, perhaps not tomorrow, but soon. Your body, loyal for so long in its own flawed way, is now betraying you in earnest. You are not shocked. You are not even particularly afraid. You are tired, bone deep tired, as if all the years of illness and effort have finally caught up. You lie back against the pillows, stare at the familiar cracks in the ceiling, and think, with a kind of grim satisfaction, that at least there will be no more dreadful syrups, no more half cooked roots, or sermons about resilience. The world outside your chamber continues on, oblivious. You hear laughter in the distance, a dog barking in the yard, the faint tolling of a bell. Life, relentless and indifferent, does not pause for your suffering. It never has. All you can do is watch, listen, and wait. You feel the first signs of the end, and having lived your entire life in expectation of it, you almost welcome its arrival. When the end finally stops being a rumor and becomes your reality, you do not rage, nor do you rally. There is no grand last stand, no heroic speech, no summoning of reserves for a battle you know you cannot win. Instead, you discover a new, almost comforting clarity. It is as if you have stepped into a quiet, gray chamber outside the world of struggle, a room where nothing is demanded except patience and a certain gloomy politeness. The courtiers, sensing your withdrawal, become even more attentive. You are visited by men and women who, until recently, only spoke to you about taxes or land disputes. Now they murmur encouragement and prayers, offering platitudes about your strength and wisdom, as if flattery might mend what time and disease have broken. They stand at the foot of your bed in orderly lines, each waiting for the chance to say something memorable, or at least not embarrassing. Some bring gifts, icons, rings, small relics, tokens meant to comfort or perhaps curry favor in a future they are already planning. You do not begrudge them their awkwardness. Death is as much a social event as a private one. Everyone has a role: the hopeful doctor, the resigned priest, the stoic advisor, the weeping servant who tries not to drip tears into the basin of cold water. You recognize, with a dark amusement, that you are the host of a party no one wishes to attend, least of all yourself. The physician continues his rituals, more for his own sake than yours. He takes your pulse, inspects your tongue, prods your stomach, and listens to your lungs with an anxious frown. When he finishes, he draws the curtains and whispers to your mother and the senior monk in the hallway. The conversation is always the same, the words heavy with tradition and the futility of hope. He is weak, but stable, he says. We must pray. Perhaps the fever will break. But you know, and they know, that the fever will not break, not this time. Your mother is a constant presence at your side. Her prayers never stop, her lips moving silently even as her eyes close in exhaustion. Sometimes You catch her glancing at you with the sharp intensity of a mother who remembers every scraped knee, every childish fever, every lost tooth. Now, those old wounds seem trivial. This final illness is not something she can kiss away or bribe a saint to heal. Her devotion is both heartbreaking and suffocating. You want to reassure her, but your words are thin, your voice brittle. All you can do is squeeze her hand and hope it is enough. The monks move in and out, chanting psalms, swinging censers heavy with incense, bringing with them the tang of sanctity and smoke. They pray over you, for you, sometimes at you. Their voices rise and fall in practiced patterns, their prayers both lullabies and farewells. You listen, half comforted and half irritated, wishing for a silence that will not come. You begin to suspect that the true gift of sainthood is not healing, but the ability to endure endless hours of chanting without complaint. In your more lucid moments, you try to remember the feel of sunlight on your skin, the sound of horses in the courtyard, the sharp, sweet taste of wine that was not mixed with herbs. But memories slip away as easily as sleep, leaving you only with the present, the scratch of rough linen, the weight of blankets that never seem to warm you, the flutter of voices around your bed. Your advisors gather in the outer chamber, their voices low, their eyes calculating. They speak in riddles and hypotheticals, their sentences looping back on themselves to avoid the obvious. Who will rule when you are gone? Who will marry whom? What of the lands and titles that you once doled out with the casual generosity of a young king who never believed he could die? Now, every decision seems final, every gift a legacy, every silence a verdict. You find yourself surrendering to the process, letting others take over the details of your life. You stop protesting when the servants rearrange your pillows for the 10th time. You no longer argue when the physician orders more broth, or the priest insists on another round of confession. Even the acts of ruling, the signing of documents, the issuing of decrees, become matters of routine, your name scrawled at the bottom of decisions made by other hands. You watch, detached, as your world is dismantled piece by piece, the scaffolding of kingship stripped away to reveal a man who is, at last, only mortal. Strangely, you do not resent it. Surrender is a relief, a letting go of burdens carried for too long. You feel lighter, almost insubstantial, as if the weight of the crown has already lifted. The people around you seem larger, more real, their concerns vivid in a way yours no longer are. You wonder if this is what it means to become a ghost before your time, to see, to listen, but no longer to act. The palace falls into a rhythm of quiet crisis. Meals are served in whispers. Messages are carried in code. Your favorite dog lies on the rug beside your bed, looking up with mournful eyes, as if sensing that you are slipping into a world where he cannot follow. The rain taps steadily at the windows, and somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls for someone else's soul. You lie still and breathe and let the world go on without you. Your last acts of resistance are small, private things. You refuse a cup of broth you know you cannot keep down. You close your eyes when the monks come to pray. You ignore the flutter of political intrigue outside your door. These are not gestures of defiance, but simple assertions of self in a world that wants only your acquiescence. And then you stop fighting. You stop pretending that recovery is possible, that the next potion or prayer will bring you back to the living. You accept that you are part of a story that began long before you and will continue long after, your own chapter closing quietly, without spectacle or regret. In surrender, you find peace, or if not peace, then at least a kind of exhausted acceptance. The struggle is over. All that remains is to wait. Somewhere along the gray, unmarked stretch of your decline, the world loses its color. You find yourself drifting through the motions of royal existence with all the enthusiasm of a man forced to reread the same tedious book. Food, once a source of comfort, is now only a parade of blandness. Broth, bread, the occasional piece of overcooked fish, all delivered with hopeful smiles by servants who are clearly trying not to look at you too closely. Even wine, which in earlier years promised some relief, or at least a gentle haze, now tastes like disappointment, flat and sour in your mouth. There is a subtle humiliation in losing interest in life's pleasures. You remember dimly the days when even a simple walk in the courtyard could be exhilarating, when a letter from an old friend could light up an afternoon, when the sight of the sun slipping behind the mountains filled you with an uncomplicated joy. Now you barely bother to look out the window. The landscape remains unchanged. Gray sky, black trees, the occasional distant movement of villagers going about lives that still matter to them. The weather shifts, and you do not. Your advisors, too, become less interesting. Their voices blend together, a background hum of complaint and cautious optimism, all tinged with the unmistakable undercurrent of expectation. Soon, it will be someone else's turn to bear these burdens. You let them drone on about trade routes and taxes, nodding at appropriate intervals, signing documents you barely read. You wonder if they notice how little you care. Perhaps it does not matter. The kingdom has always run on inertia, and your indifference is just another cog in the tired machinery of governance. The only people who still care seem to be your mother, who sits by your bedside reading psalms you no longer hear, and your physician, who clings to the rituals of treatment with the desperation of a gambler down to his last coin. He insists on checking your pulse, examining your tongue, measuring out precise doses of bitter syrup. His eyes shine with a strange mixture of fear and hope. You want to tell him to stop, to let you go, but you are too tired for even that small rebellion. Your dreams are equally lifeless. Where once you would ride through fields of memory, childhood escapades, youthful triumphs, the laughter of friends now gone, you find instead a gray fog, a wandering emptiness that leaves you more exhausted upon waking than when you closed your eyes. The line between sleep and waking blurs. You wake, sleep, wake again, and wonder if anyone would notice if you stopped altogether. The chroniclers, always hovering at the edges of your misery, ask for audiences, hoping for some final, memorable utterance to adorn the pages of history. You give them nothing but platitudes, a few recycled maxims about duty and faith, the kind of nonsense that will look dignified once inscribed on vellum and placed in the royal library. You have no last words worth recording. Your only true legacy, you suspect, will be the list of physicians who failed you and the names of the courtiers already rehearsing their obsequies. Sometimes you try to rouse yourself. You recall the sensation of riding a horse at full gallop, the wind sharp against your face, the thrill of a hunt when the quarry was still unseen. You remember, briefly, the taste of ripe fruit in summer, the salt on your lips after a swim, the crackling anticipation before a feast. But these memories belong to someone else, a version of yourself that is as distant as a legend or a saint's miracle. The body in the bed is not a king, not really. It is simply a vessel of symptoms, waiting for an ending. Even the rituals of faith lose their meaning. The Psalms are just words, the prayers empty gestures, the relics presented for your blessing cold and inert. You watch the priests with the same detachment you reserve for the chroniclers and the doctors. You are the center of their ceremony, but the ceremony is hollow, a performance for an audience that is slowly losing interest. Sometimes your mind wanders to the affairs of the world outside your chamber. You hear distant news, an early harvest, a skirmish on the border, a festival in a distant village. Once, such tidings would have prompted action, or at least a brief spark of curiosity. Now, they are like the wind against the window, present but irrelevant. The world will spin on, with or without your attention. In this new, narrow existence, time itself loses its shape. There are no meaningful markers, only a slow fading of everything that once made life urgent or beautiful. Meals come and go, prayers are said, medicines administered. Each day is a blurred copy of the one before, each night a slower descent into the same dull oblivion. Your family, your advisors, the monks, the chroniclers, they all wait for some sign, a final gesture, a word, anything to mark the transition from life to death. You can offer them only silence and an increasing indifference to their efforts. You suspect, with a kind of grim humor, that your lack of interest will be noted in the chronicles as serene acceptance, as if you have chosen to leave the world with dignity rather than with the limp apathy that truly defines these final weeks. So you lose an interest in life, and in losing it, you gain a strange, weightless freedom. Nothing matters, nothing can hurt you, nothing is expected except endurance. You are at last untethered from the concerns that once seemed so vital. The world will do as it pleases, and you will watch, or not, without regret. Your illness, once a private struggle, becomes a public spectacle the moment it lingers past the first few days. The castle, so recently a place of somber routine, transforms into a hive of whispers, each chamber a theater for speculation and invention. Courtiers who rarely noticed your existence now build entire conversations around the mysterious state of your health. Your body, failing and unremarkable as it may feel to you, becomes the most interesting thing happening in Navarre. The rumors begin with servants who are expert in the subtle art of exaggeration. The woman who empties your chamber pot tells the kitchen staff you are coughing blood, though you have done no such thing. A stable boy claims to have seen your physician sneaking out of your chambers with tears in his eyes. Soon your headaches are described as fits, your loss of appetite as refusal of all sustenance, and your fatigue as the clear mark of approaching death. Each detail is embroidered as it travels. By the time the rumor reaches the city, you are said to be unconscious, speaking only in Latin, or visited nightly by the ghost of your father. Your court, trained in politics and survival, listens closely. Some courtiers treat your illness as a temporary inconvenience, a hiccup in the daily schedule. Others see opportunity, already shifting their alliances, quietly meeting with distant relatives, or drafting letters to foreign courts. The most ambitious ones practice their somber faces in private mirrors, just in case they must deliver tragic news before the assembled council. They circulate stories about your health with the skill of professional minstrels, each tale tailored to suit their ambitions or anxieties. It is, in a way, a performance. Every day, someone brings a new theory about the cause of your decline. Some say it is poison, never mind that you have not eaten a solitary meal in weeks, let alone a suspicious one. Others blame sorcery, the inevitable accusation in a world where disease so often resists explanation. There are even those who insist your suffering is divine punishment for a long forgotten political betrayal, or perhaps for failing to build that new chapel your mother urged upon you last winter. As the days pass, your rooms become busier than ever. The devout send relics and icons, hoping that their prayers might attach themselves to your recovery and, by extension, to your gratitude. Ambitious relatives arrive from distant lands, hovering at the periphery, ready to offer support, or, failing that, to be present for whatever history is about to unfold. You see them in the corners, pretending not to stare, discussing your pallor or your silence with the eager solemnity of undertakers sizing up a corpse. The rumors spill out beyond the castle walls, infecting the city and the countryside. In the taverns, you are already dead. In the markets, you are rumored to have risen from your sickbed at midnight to issue a decree or to curse your enemies. Each version of your story is more dramatic than the last. The baker's wife assures her customers that you were visited by an angel, while the blacksmith's apprentice swears he saw your coffin being built. The peasants, who rarely have much say in royal affairs, nonetheless debate your fate with the seriousness of seasoned politicians. For a little while, your name is on every tongue. Even your closest family members are drawn into the web of speculation. Your mother, ever dignified, rebuffs questions with a cold glance, but her silence is interpreted as confirmation of the worst. Your siblings, if any remain, are questioned relentlessly by courtiers and priests alike. Does the king sleep? Does he eat? Does he recognize you? Every vague answer is twisted, amplified, passed along as proof of one theory or another. The chroniclers hover nearby, sharpening their quills and collecting anecdotes. They know, as everyone does, that a king's death is not merely a personal matter, it is a moment of transition, a pageant that must be recorded in exquisite, if not always accurate, detail. You sometimes wonder what stories they will settle on. Will you be remembered as stoic, as penitent, as struck down by fate, or by your own errors? The choice, you realize, may have little to do with you at all. You become a shadow in your own life, an object of speculation rather than an agent. Visitors speak in hushed tones, as if your body might shatter at a raised voice. You overhear your own prognosis repeated in a dozen different forms, none quite true, none quite false. The rumors have a life of their own, fed by boredom, anxiety, and the universal fear of what comes next. Your physician, meanwhile, is both villain and hero in these stories. On good days, he is the tireless healer, selflessly tending to his monarch. On bad days, he is the incompetent fool, or worse, the secret poisoner. He is rumored to have a mistress who knows dark arts, or to have made a bargain with a rival kingdom. Sometimes you are tempted to ask him for his own favorite version, just to see if the truth ever makes the rounds. And then there are the prophecies. Someone claims to have seen your face in a dream, pale and crowned with stars, a sure sign you will recover and usher in a golden age. Others claim that ravens circling the castle tower are a portent of doom. A toothless old woman at the market says she remembers a comet blazing on the night of your birth and is certain that kings born under such omens never die peacefully. The rumors multiply until even you are uncertain of your own fate. Are you truly dying or only playing the part expected of you? Some days you feel almost well, though never entirely free of pain, and imagine the shock your recovery would bring to the eager mourners gathered outside your door. Other days, the effort of lifting your head from the pillow is too much, and you wonder if the rumors might, for once, be mercifully accurate. Through it all, you remain the silent center of a spinning world of stories. You do not bother to correct the record. You do not have the energy. And besides, the truth would be too dull for anyone's taste. The kingdom needs a tale, and your failing body is the best story available. You are at last famous in the only way that matters. As the source of rumors, the subject of speculation, the monarch whose passing is eagerly awaited, feared, and gossiped about in equal measure. It is an odd kind of immortality, but it will have to do. Eventually, the whispers and rumors give way to action. It is as if, having willed your death into being with enough speculation, the world around you decides to tidy up in preparation for the event itself. You do not need to rise from your bed or even lift your head to sense the shift. It is in the hurried steps of servants, the low voiced conferences in shadowy corners, the new gravity with which the world regards your every breath. You notice first in the faces of those closest to you. Your mother has abandoned hope for a miraculous recovery. Instead, she marshals her energies for what comes next. Prayers, of course, but also the practical business of legacy. She consults the court chaplain about masses for the dead, quietly instructs the steward to update inventories, and makes lists that are longer than you would have thought possible for a single person's passing. You catch her at your bedside once, not praying, but counting beads, coins, candles, responsibilities that will soon fall to someone else. Your chambers take on a strange, anticipatory tidiness. The same sheets are changed with suspicious frequency, as if the right arrangement of linen might please the angel of death, or at least make his visit more efficient. Your favorite armchair disappears, carried away for repairs. You sense it will not return. Relics and icons accumulate on every surface, a hedge of superstitious insurance against whatever comes next. The physician, having exhausted the arsenal of medieval medicine, now hovers not with new syrups, but with a resigned acceptance, occasionally suggesting comfort rather than cure. More than once, you wake to find the court's chronicler lurking nearby, ready to catch your last words, or perhaps just your last look. He does not ask questions anymore. Your answers are thin, and besides, history will write what it wants. Instead, he observes with the patience of someone waiting for the weather to change, or for a page to turn by itself. You sometimes wonder what will make it into the official record, the way your voice faltered, the lists your mother made, the slow, methodical packing away of the objects that once meant something to you. You are not the only one being prepared. The court itself seems to vibrate with nervous energy, everyone rehearsing their part in the great ceremony of royal death. The head steward inspects the supply of black cloth, checking for moth holes and ensuring enough for both the household and the city's cathedral. The palace kitchens experiment with funeral feasts, tasting sullen stews and breads that are meant to be somber but satisfying. No garlic, nothing lively, only flavors that signal respect and grief. The royal tailor quietly mends the mourning robes that have been in storage for a generation, taking them out, dusting them off, letting the cloth hang in the sunlight for a few final days. The monks are busier than ever, copying prayers and liturgies in careful, slow script. They practice the special processional chants reserved for the funerals of kings. The bell ringers are instructed to keep the great bell in good order and ready for the midnight toll, though no one will say the word death aloud. Even the young pages are coached in how to keep their heads bowed and their faces solemn for the moment when all eyes will be on them as witnesses to your end. Your advisors move in a shifting cloud just outside your chamber. They are deep in discussion, voices never raised, faces never smiling. The topic is always succession, never you. You catch the names of distant relatives, the enumeration of properties, the reckoning of old alliances. You sense in their eyes a mixture of relief and anticipation, the morbid but necessary readiness that comes when the transfer of power is near. No one wants to seem eager, but everyone wants to be ready. The preparations are not limited to the palace. You hear that the city has been put on notice. The cathedral floor has been scrubbed, candles set aside for a vigil, and the guilds are organizing their banners for a morning procession. The merchants, ever practical, have ordered more black dye, anticipating a brisk trade in sashes and ribbons. The peasants gossip in the fields about who will follow you, what omens the next rain might bring. Even the animals seem to sense the change. A dog whines outside your door, the horses stamp in their stalls, pigeons circle the bell tower as if rehearsing a funeral flight. You watch all of this with a detachment bordering on awe. It is like watching the construction of a stage on which you are both the star and the only audience. Every detail is scrutinized, every moment rehearsed, so that when the curtain finally falls, the transition will be smooth, dignified, unforgettable. It is the one thing over which you no longer have any control. You surrender to it, grateful in a strange way for the distraction it provides. You are too tired for regret, too far gone for sentiment. Sometimes you wish you could join in the preparations, to offer suggestions about the food or the music, to make a joke about the monotony of black cloth. But you know it is better this way, to recede quietly into the background of your own story, letting others handle the burdens you carried for so long. You marvel at the seriousness of it all, at the way your end has become a communal project, a ritual for the living as much as for the dying. When the preparations are finished, when every candle is counted, every robe pressed, every prayer copied, there is a hush that settles over the palace. The world waits, holding its breath, for you to leave it. And in that silence, you wait too, watching as the kingdom prepares for the moment when you will be gone, knowing that soon enough everything will belong to someone else. If you ever imagined your death, you probably pictured something quick or at least grand. Perhaps a final, stirring speech or a moment of quiet nobility, your family gathered reverently around your bed. Reality, as it so often does, chooses a different script, one that unfolds with a slowness so methodical and humiliating that all your daydreams of dignity collapse under the weight of bodily failure. Your decline is a long, tedious spiral, an unraveling that resists the dramatic timing favored by poets and priests. Each day is a little worse than the one before, but never bad enough to bring closure. You exist in a limbo of half sleep and discomfort, dragged along by a body that refuses to give up the ghost out of sheer spite. There are no miracles. There is instead the grinding monotony of not dying. The business of survival shrinks to a series of daily indignities. Once you could rise unaided. Now you are propped up with pillows, your skin sticking to the linen. Servants, once invisible, now invade your privacy hourly, changing sheets, bathing your limp body, turning you so the sores do not rot straight through to the bone. You are spoon-fed broth like an infant. What little food you take is met with whispered encouragement, as though each sip is a victory in some forgotten campaign. You lose all sense of modesty. Bodily functions, once private, now public, become another arena for the well meaning concern of others. Your chamber pot is emptied more often than your inbox of royal correspondence. The physician examines you with the same clinical detachment reserved for a sickly farm animal. He pinches, pokes, and prods, offering explanations in a hushed voice to your family as if you cannot hear or understand. Your mind, ever your own, struggles to keep pace with the betrayals of flesh. Sometimes you drift in and out of consciousness, moments of clarity flaring and fading like candlelight in a draught. The line between waking and dreaming blurs. You see faces from the past, parents, friends, rivals, all mingling in the shadowy corners of your room. Sometimes you confuse the living for the dead, and vice versa. You try to speak, to say something memorable, but your words emerge slurred and incomprehensible, dissolving into coughs or silence. Those around you pretend not to notice the humiliation. Your mother holds your hand and wipes your mouth when you dribble. The priests keep up their prayers, their faces set in practiced masks of compassion. The physician reassures you that pain is a sign of the soul's struggle and that suffering brings you closer to God. You are less convinced. Pain feels less like holiness and more like the body's last stubborn protest. Your body grows smaller as your world shrinks. Your legs, once sturdy, wither into sticks beneath the sheets. Your hands are bony and cold, the skin drawn taut and bruised from the endless poking of needles and fingers. You smell of sweat, sour breath, and the herbs used to mask the stench of decay. The windows are kept closed, the air thick with incense, and the faint metallic tang of approaching death. At times, you are aware of the parade of visitors, family, clergy, favored advisors. They come to pay their respects, to be seen, to assure themselves that the king is still among the living, if only barely. Their words float past you. Stay strong, Majesty. You are in our prayers. God's will is mysterious. You nod or you do not. It hardly matters. They have already begun saying goodbye. You begin to lose track of time. Nights and days blend together, marked only by the changing of the servants and the shifting light behind the curtains. You sleep, but your rest is shallow, troubled by fever and the weight of your own body. You dream of running through open fields, of laughter echoing through halls now silent. Sometimes you dream of nothing at all, a darkness that is not frightening, only quiet. Sometimes you wonder if the end will ever arrive, or if you are doomed to linger indefinitely, suspended between worlds. The castle, once the center of your power, is now reduced to the size of your bed. The outside world recedes until you care only for the small comforts still available: a damp cloth on your forehead, a kind word, the cool touch of a breeze that slips past the vigilant guards, and the endless precautions. When the pain is at its worst, You almost welcome the oblivion that threatens to swallow you. You pray, or you try to. The words do not come easily. Faith, like appetite, is hard to summon at the end. The priests assure you that you are being prepared for the next life. You would settle now for the end of this one. Those around you search your face for signs: a furrowed brow, a change in breath, the faintest flicker of a final effort. Each day they wait for a moment of closure, something to mark the passage from king to memory. But you deny them even this. Death, like everything else in your life, arrives not with a flourish, but with a long, grinding sigh. You die slowly, without poetry or grace, with all the mess and misery the human body can conjure. If there is dignity in it, it is not the dignity you ever wished for, but the only kind left. The sheer, stubborn fact of being alive, right up until you are not. As your world contracts to the narrow borders of your sickbed, your mind drifts backward, not out of nostalgia. There is little room for sweetness in your memories, but out of a kind of exhausted inevitability. The present is nothing but pain, indignity, and the steady, suffocating care of others. The future, even if it exists, does not belong to you. That leaves only the past, a realm both familiar and strangely foreign, as if you are leafing through someone else's old ledger. The earliest recollections are fragments: the damp chill of stone floors beneath your feet as a child, the way candlelight flickered on the faces of anxious nursemaids, the smell of the kitchen when the first bread of the day was pulled from the oven. You remember being carried, small and feverish, from room to room, the adults around you pretending to control a world that was always slipping through their fingers. There is a peculiar comfort in these helpless memories, as if the lack of agency was somehow more honest than the endless charade of adulthood. You recall your first lessons, Latin declensions delivered in a dry, endless monotone, the heavy weight of a wooden sword in your hand, the sting of failure when you could not recite your lineage to the satisfaction of your tutor. In those days, you imagined kingship as a kind of armor, something you could put on to protect yourself from hurt and humiliation. No one explained that kingship was simply another word for obligation, and that the armor would get heavier with each passing year. Your mind jumps forward to the early triumphs, your first successful hunt, the rough cheers of men twice your age as you rode back with a brace of rabbits. There is the memory of your father's approving nod, your mother's careful praise, the sense that for a brief moment you had lived up to expectations. You see yourself laughing with friends whose faces you can barely recall: Martin, Diego, the other boys who grew up beside you and who, one by one, slipped away, carried off by fever or misfortune, before their laughter could harden into adult cynicism. In the haze of fever, you revisit the long, aimless days of youth, hiding from tutors in the castle gardens, inventing games with rules that changed as soon as you began to lose, stealing apples from the kitchen, and pretending to be bandits. These memories are tinged with a lightness that is almost suspicious, as if your mind edits out the constant threat of illness, the sharp reminders of mortality, that lurked behind every door. For a few moments, you are allowed to forget the future that awaited you and all the burdens it brought. There are darker recollections, too. The first real friend you lost to disease. The first time you saw a grown man weep over a body. The day you realized that your own survival was a kind of betrayal, that every illness you overcame was a prelude to the next, and that victory was never more than temporary. These memories sit heavy on your chest, pressing down with the same implacable force as the fever that now rules your body. You remember your coronation, less for its ceremony than for the exhaustion you felt standing in robes that weighed more than a child, the crown digging into your scalp while courtiers watched for any sign of weakness. The vows you made ring hollow now, but you recall the sound of them echoing off the cathedral walls. You remember thinking, even as the archbishop pronounced you king, that you would never be allowed to stop pretending. There is a kind of dark comedy in that realization, and you almost laugh, a dry, choking sound that brings the physician rushing to your side. Other memories float up unbidden. The first time you tasted wine, the way the world spun pleasantly around you. The first falcon you held, its alien weight and keen gaze. The quiet moments by the fire when, for a heartbeat, you felt safe. There are lovers, too, faces and names blurred by time and pain, moments of heat and softness that seem both impossibly distant and uncomfortably near. You remember the thrill of forbidden things. Sneaking out to the city in disguise, hearing the real opinions of your subjects, if only for a night. And always, woven through it all, is the undercurrent of illness, the ever present cough, the nights spent shivering beneath too many blankets, the endless parade of doctors with their contradictory instructions and their air of fatalistic cheer. Even your happiest memories are shadowed by the knowledge that every pleasure came with a price, every victory with a waiting reckoning. In your rare lucid hours, you wonder if others remember their lives this way, fragmented, contradictory, colored by fatigue and regret. You suspect they do, though few would admit it. You try to extract some meaning from it all, some lesson to pass on to the chronicler lurking just out of sight. But the lessons are as elusive as rest. Life is not a narrative, only a ledger, a record of what was survived, what was lost, and what was never quite grasped. You find that you do not resent these memories, not even the painful ones. They are yours, more real now than the world outside your window. They have lost their sharpness, their urgency, but not their weight. You understand, finally, that this is what it means to be dying, to inhabit a world made up entirely of the past, while the present fades and the future becomes an afterthought. And so you remember your youth, its small triumphs and larger losses, its fleeting moments of joy and its omnipresent shadows. In the end, memory is all that remains, and you cling to it not because it is pleasant, but because it is yours. There is no single moment of surrender. The process is slow and cumulative, a quiet wearing down, not a dramatic breaking. You do not make a grand speech or announce to the assembled court that you have relinquished your will to live. Instead, submission creeps in at the edges, settling in your bones and your breath, turning certainty into acceptance by degrees so gentle you hardly notice. The people around you notice, of course. They are eager for a sign, something to mark the change from resistance to resignation. Your mother's prayers become softer, almost whispered, as if she does not wish to interrupt the slow, downward current. The physician, no longer hopeful, now moves with the dignity of a priest officiating a final rite. The servants, their eyes red and tired, go about their work with a kind of reverence reserved for the truly helpless. You stop asking questions about the kingdom, the affairs of state, the crises and quarrels that once animated your mornings no longer spark even the faintest curiosity. When your advisors arrive, clutching their ledgers and requests, you let them speak without listening. Their words seem to drift around you, muffled and faint, like voices from a distant room. Sometimes you nod, sometimes you do not. The habit of consent remains even as the meaning disappears. You are dimly aware that things are happening in your name. Decrees are issued, lands exchanged, alliances formed and broken, but you have surrendered both the power and the desire to influence them. There is relief in this abdication. The burdens you once carried so grimly now slide off your shoulders, landing with a soft thud on the backs of those who have waited years for the chance to bear them. You do not envy them. The world of your bedchamber contracts further. The fire is kept burning low. The windows remain shuttered against the chill, the only light a soft, perpetual dusk. The rhythm of your days is determined by the rotation of those who attend you, the nurse with her gentle hands, the priest with his well-worn prayers, the servant who brings water and empties the basin, moving with a grace that comes from repetition rather than hope. You are grateful for their care, even as you become less and less a participant in your own life. There are still small acts of will, though they grow fewer each day. Sometimes you refuse a cup of broth, not out of spite, but out of simple exhaustion. Sometimes you close your eyes when a visitor enters, making it clear you are not available for conversation. Sometimes you manage a joke, dry, cynical, more for yourself than for anyone else, about the monotony of dying. These are the final exercises of autonomy, as much a part of your submission as the stillness that follows. The process of dying is, if nothing else, a lesson in humility. You accept help for everything, to be fed, washed, lifted, even turned in bed. You allow strangers to see you at your weakest, your most animal. Dignity becomes something theoretical, a concept for philosophers and poets. You learn instead the value of patience, of silence, of simply letting things happen without protest or regret. The world outside your chamber continues, indifferent to your retreat. You hear the sounds of distant activity, the barking of a dog, the tolling of the church bell, the faint thrum of rain on the stone roof. Sometimes you wonder if you will be missed, if anyone beyond these walls will notice when your story ends. The chronicler, ever diligent, sits in the corner, recording not your words, but your silences, noting the absence of interest, the gradual erasure of personality that accompanies the body's decline. Your sleep deepens, stretches, grows into something like a rehearsal for oblivion. Dreams become less frequent, and when they come, they are gentle, the faces of the dead, the memory of sunlight, the feeling of floating in a river. You wake less often, and when you do, the world is already faded at the edges, voices indistinct, faces blurring together. You realize in these moments that submission is not a choice, but a state, one you have entered without meaning to, simply because the alternative was impossible to maintain. The rituals continue around you. The monks chant, the priests pray, the advisors hover, waiting for the right moment to begin their next act. You are at the center of a ceremony whose conclusion everyone knows, though no one will say it aloud. There is a strange comfort in this inevitability. The suspense is over. The only task left is to see it through. Sometimes, in the quietest moments, you find a peace you never managed in life. There is nothing left to worry about, nothing to fight for, nothing to lose. You let go of ambition, regret, hope, and even memory. You become, in the final days, a kind of ghost, still present, still breathing, but already untethered from the world that once claimed every hour of your attention. The final submission is not dramatic, not marked by a gesture or a word. It is simply a matter of letting go, of ceasing to care, of allowing yourself to drift with the current that has been pulling you for so long. You submit to the inevitable, and in that submission, find a kind of freedom at last. One morning, or perhaps it is evening, your sense of time has long since evaporated. Your breath rattles a little more slowly. Your hands stop searching for the edge of the blanket, and your eyelids, which have felt impossibly heavy for days, finally surrender to gravity. You do not notice the precise moment when your presence passes from the living world to the waiting pages of history. For you, there is no fanfare, no vision, no final rush of memory. There is only quiet and the gradual extinguishing of awareness. For everyone else, however, your absence is immediately apparent. The room changes. The servants, who have become experts at pretending not to watch you die, suddenly stop in the middle of their chores. The physician checks your pulse with the solemnity of a high priest and then bows his head, more relieved than sad. The chronicler, sensing the shift, straightens in his chair and begins a new page, one headed not with your name, but with the date and the phrase, "In this year the king died." Your mother weeps, but not with surprise. Your advisors bow their heads in practiced grief, each already rehearsing how they will tell the story later, how their role in your final hours was crucial, poignant, or at the very least dignified. The priests launch into prayers with a ferocity reserved for kings and the very wealthy, their voices rising and falling in rhythms as old as the stones beneath your bed. Outside your chamber, the news spreads with alarming speed. Within the hour, the great bell of the cathedral begins to toll, sending its heavy sound through the city, across the fields, and out to the farthest villages. Merchants pause in their bargaining, peasants in their planting, and for a moment, all of Navarre is united by the rumor of your end. For a brief theatrical pause, the kingdom remembers you, but only for a moment. Your death, important as it feels inside the castle, is one more entry in the long, repetitive ledger of royal mortality. The court mobilizes with the efficiency of a well practiced troupe. Black cloth is hung over doors and windows, candles are set out in the hallways, and every noble who can plausibly claim a connection to your family begins the delicate dance of public mourning. The royal kitchen produces vast quantities of tasteless, respectable food, feeding the household through the long, awkward days of ceremony. Your body is treated with the deference you spent a lifetime earning. It is washed, wrapped, anointed, and finally dressed in the finest garments you own, clothes you have not worn in years, armor that no longer fits, a crown that feels as heavy in death as it did in life. You are laid out in the great hall for a procession of mourners, the sorrowful, the curious, and the calculating all mingle, each performing their own brand of grief. Some pray, some stare, some measure the weight of the crown, already imagining it on another head. The chroniclers work with urgency, gathering stories, embellishing details, polishing the narrative of your reign until it shines with the right amount of melancholy and grandeur. Your illnesses, your failings, and your minor scandals are conveniently minimized. Your victories, no matter how modest, are elevated to the status of legend. There is an unspoken agreement that a dead king is best remembered as a symbol, not as a collection of symptoms and disappointments. The kingdom, meanwhile, does not pause for long. The machinery of succession grinds into motion. New proclamations are posted at city gates. Messengers gallop across the countryside with news for neighboring courts. Already, the next monarch's advisors are convening in rooms that still smell faintly of incense and illness. Your name lingers in conversations only as long as it takes for the practicalities to be resolved. In the villages, the peasants speak of your passing for a day, maybe two. They remember the famine you failed to prevent, the bridge you built, the tax you forgot to repeal. Some say you were cursed, others that you were kind, a few that you were a shadow, never quite present, never quite absent. For most, your reign is reduced to a handful of anecdotes, retold by those who once glimpsed you at a procession or heard your name pronounced at Mass. The world moves on. The crops are planted, the markets reopen, and the castle, after a suitable period of mourning, returns to its cycles of intrigue and complaint. Your image, painted in the best possible light, is hung in the chapel where future generations will pass by without recognizing the man beneath the crown. You become history, tidied, curated, transformed. The stories people tell about you become less about who you were and more about what you represent. The end of one era, the beginning of another, a cautionary tale, or an object of nostalgia depending on the needs of the storyteller. The details of your slow decline, your private thoughts, your moments of regret and resignation, all are washed away by time, leaving only the outline of a life that fit neatly within the expectations of kingship. Perhaps it is better this way. The dead, after all, cannot correct the living. You become a lesson, a rumor, a name inscribed in the margins of chronicles. For a while, your memory lingers, in the scent of incense, in the hush of the palace at night, in the uneasy dreams of those who watched you die. But eventually, even that fades. You are history now, whether you wanted it or not, a story for others to tell, a warning or a comfort, but never again a living thing. In the aftermath of your passing, the kingdom grows quiet, as if holding its breath before resuming the business of living. The ceremonies continue, the procession, the tolling bells, the rivers of black cloth flowing through the city. The people mourn, or at least they perform the rituals of mourning, kneeling, bowing, whispering the appropriate prayers in crowded chapels and candlelit homes. But in the silent corners of the palace, where the real work of memory and forgetting takes place, the chronicler sits hunched over a battered desk, quill in hand, ready to reduce your life to a sentence or two. He is not a bad man, this chronicler. He has watched your reign from the margins, filling up his ledgers with the small failures and even smaller triumphs of a king whose life was mostly defined by endurance. He does not flinch at the messiness of it all. He is used to kings who die too early, too late, or in the wrong way. He has written out the deaths of fools and heroes, martyrs and tyrants, and knows that all endings are equal on the page. Your name is written slowly, carefully, as if the act itself might preserve you for another day. Sanchez, the seventh of his name, King of Navarre, died in the year 1234. That is the line. There are a few additions, a mention of your parentage, a nod to the years you ruled, perhaps a carefully chosen phrase about your wisdom or piety, more out of obligation than accuracy. The space for commentary is limited. The world has already moved on. The words are ordinary, just ink on parchment, destined to be recopied, edited, and misremembered in generations to come. Somewhere in the margin, the chronicler might jot a personal note. He suffered long, or perhaps he writes nothing at all, his mind already on the next event, the new king's first council, the feast to follow, the unrest in the western valleys. Your place in the story is sealed, not as a protagonist, not as a villain, but as a necessary interval, a bridge between the past and whatever future history will bother to remember. The artifacts of your life are sorted and cataloged. Your crown, still heavy with sweat and worry, is polished and placed on a new head. The scepter, so often held in trembling fingers, is presented with ceremonial gravity to an heir already planning their own legacy. The tapestries depicting your victories are left to fade in the hall, the colors dimming as dust and sunlight do their slow work. The garments you wore in your final days are quietly burned, a practical mercy in a world that fears the lingering touch of sickness. Within weeks, your rooms are repurposed. The bed where you lay so long, tangled in pain and sheets, is stripped and replaced for a distant cousin. The fire that warmed your last nights burns now for someone else. Servants who nursed you now serve a new master, their loyalty shifting with the ease of people trained to adapt. If they speak of you, it is in passing, a memory recalled at the end of a long day, a warning about drafts, or a joke about stubborn kings. Beyond the walls of the palace, your story continues its slow evaporation. The villagers who gathered to watch your funeral soon find other distractions: an outbreak of illness, an early frost, the promise of a good harvest. The merchants count their coins and forget the brief pause your death brought to the market. Children grow up learning a different set of names, a new king's likeness stamped on coins and prayers. In the countryside, the memory of your reign survives in the cracks of old bridges, in the stones of the churches you repaired, in rumors that grow less accurate with each retelling. And always there is the chronicle, the only thing that promises any kind of permanence. Generations from now, scholars will pore over the faded parchment, searching for meaning in your brief mention. They will wonder at the gaps, the silences, the spaces where a life is reduced to a single, neat line. Some will speculate about your character, inventing virtues or vices as needed. Others will skip past your name entirely, searching for more dramatic stories, more flamboyant rulers. No one will remember the taste of your final meal, the smell of incense in your sick room, the endless, circling prayers that filled your last nights. No one will recall the ache in your bones, the loneliness of the long afternoons, the strange comfort you found in submission. No one will write of the small kindnesses, the weary jokes, the moments when you forgot you were dying and simply lived, if only for a moment. You are at last just a line in the chronicle. The world continues, uncaring and indifferent, making room for new stories, new kings, new lines. The dust settles, the ink dries, and your name becomes just one more mark among thousands, neither celebrated nor condemned, simply recorded. If there is any legacy, it is this: that you endured quietly and completely until there was nothing left but a line. And perhaps, in a world that forgets so easily, endurance is as much as anyone can hope for.